Now for the last part of this section, I just want to talk about the higher power roots, okay? So in this part, we are talking about the nth roots of the nth powers. Okay, so pay attention here now. You have square root of a squared, or square root of a term squared, however you want to look at it. If you have some expression of this form for any real number a, your square root of a squared is basically the absolute value of a, because if you remember, we had talked about this in the beginning. If you have a negative number here and you square the square root of that, you always end up with a positive number. That's why we're using the absolute value here. And as I said, because a could be a negative number, so for positive or negative, this statement will be true. Okay, so what happens with higher powered root when you have nth root of nth power? So in this case, you had square root of a squared. Here we're talking about what if you had just any other, cube root to a to the third, or fourth root a to the fourth. Any of those situations, what would you do? Okay, so if n is an even number, okay, even positive integer. So we're talking about this n here, okay? If it is an even positive integer, then your nth root of a to the nth power will be the absolute value of a. Okay? So if this is an even positive number, you will take this, and the solution to this one would be the absolute value of a. What happens if that n is an odd number? Okay? And if n is an odd positive integer, so basically what we're trying to say here is that when you have n as an even number, you use the absolute value, and when n is an odd number, you don't have to use the absolute value. So let's go ahead and use these rules to find these examples, or to find the solutions to these examples. So how about sixth root of -4 to the sixth power? Now again, remember we said if n is an even positive integer, and you can see n here is a positive 6, then the value for this is going to be absolute value of -4, absolute value of a, which will of course give us +4 as the answer. Okay, this is when n is even. What happens if n is an odd number like 5? -9 to the fifth power. Now we said when n is odd, then you don't have to use the absolute value, you just take the number as it is, and in this case your solution would be -9. Okay, now you may also come across an example of this form where you have a negative on the outside, so that negative on the outside you will carry forward, and then for this part just go ahead and apply the same idea, even n, which means that you take the absolute value of -9. Absolute value of -9 is +9, and then carry over that negative sign again, and you end up with -9 as your answer. So there's just a little bit of a difference between number 1 and number 3, where you have that negative sign on the outside. All right, and this takes care of section 10.1.